I got a few more. That's still not the same time.
Okay.
I gotta make it better.
Welcome everybody. We're on Daf Ches, and continuation from yesterday. Starts to zoom out. The subject is why do you need a pasuk to say that Yibum does not override Arayas? Of course it doesn't, because I say Dochalosa, I say, but not also say Sheish B'Koris. So what's the Havamina? Why do you need a pasuk? And we tried 6 tries. That maybe I say Dochalosa, I say Sheish B'Koris. Maybe it does. We tried from Mila and Pesach and Tamid, that didn't work. Then we tried from Kibbutz Avayim, then Beis Hamikdash and Misas Bez, and also didn't work. So we gave up. And then one more try in Amar Aleph, the Gemara tried another try about maybe it's considered a Davar Shai B'Klal V'Yasam L'Klal. The Gemara says no, it's Davar Shai B'Klal V'Yasam. We got to a terrace which worked, and we're still in the middle of it. But this terrace is going to work. The Gemara tries Mamatzinu. I thought yesterday that it was the same terrace, Mamatzinu, and then the Gemara says whole Vishtri. But I think, and I saw that some learn like that whole Vishtri is a new terrace. The Mamatzinu also didn't work. Mamatzinu was that since you find that the Torah permitted a brother's wife, so maybe other Yisurim also. What's the difference? But the Gemara seemed to disprove that because it's going to be a brother's wife plus. It's not going to be something that's also. It's going to be both of them. It's going to be a brother's wife plus, let's say, a wife's sister. So both of them together, you have no raya. So now the Gemara says a new svara, which the Torah is not related to the teretz of a Mematzinu, all history that we find if the Torah permitted an Isser, so all the other Yisurim are also mutter. It knocks down all the other Yisurim either also. And the Gemara yesterday proved that from a Mitzorah with a Valkyrie, that the Mitzorah on the 8th day has to, in order to do the Torah process, he has to go to the Beis Hamikdash, put his hands into the Azara, and he also became a Balkari, and that would stop him that he wouldn't be able to. And since the Torah permitted him Tzaras, it also permits the Keri also. Oh, put the Tzarato, put the Kirio. That's as far as we got yesterday, and that Torah seems to hold true. Hold history. The Gemara on the bottom words Midami Ladula. The one now they're going further now. Midami Ladula, is it the same case as Zula? The Gemara is going to ask that whole history would not work over here. So the Gemara on the top of Daf Ches says the difference is going to be the heter ever activated. It means the Gemara that the case of the Mitzorah on the 8th day came out of there. Pesach, he's supposed to bring his karbanos that day, and even if there's the carry standing in the way, the carry is also going to get knocked down. We're going to allow the Balkari to come into the Azora, to put his thumbs into the Azora. But the Gemara is going to say that's only if there was a heter for the Mitzorah, that the Mitzorah's heter was activated, means that it's already came the 8th morning. But if he would have become a Balkari early, he was going to say in a couple of lines that at night, before he was able to bring the korban, he became a Balkari. So then, since the heter of the Mitzorah was never activated, so to speak, I made up that word activated, it never came to play. So then, it's not considered that's history. It's only history when it actually was ready to go. It was he could have bought the korbanos. So then, even though something comes in the way, we say also whole history. If it was activated, so then you don't have this heter. Here the Gemara talks about the 2 Yisurim. One Isser is going to be the Eshesach, like the standard case of Yibum is that there's a brother's wife that we're going to be matir, and that heter together with it is going to be matir any other Isser. But that's only if the heter of the brother's wife was activated. And the Gemara talks about who married first and who died first. And who died means there's the dead brother and there's the live brother. As Yibum, what is Yibum? There are 2 brothers. One of them lived without children. The other one is alive. He survived him, and he's supposed to marry the brother's wife. Who got married first? And they married sisters. The case is that they married sisters. 2 brothers married 2 sisters. And that's the question over here, that besides being a brother's wife, his sister-in-law is also going to be a sister-in-law on 2 sides. It's a brother's wife, it's also a wife's sister. The same woman. And that the Gemara said that there'd be as far as to say whole history. That's why you have to have the pasuk yavamos yaval, which we'll look on for all this time. Why do you need a chiddush? What's the chiddush? The chiddush would be because maybe a whole history, since the heter of the brother's wife, the isser of the brother's wife became mutter, so maybe the isser of the sister of the wife's sister also became mutter. But the Gemara says that only would work and only would be havamina if the heter of the brother's wife was activated first, which would have meant the Gemara is going to say it in a lot of words, but the Gemara is going to say that the one who died, he married his wife, and his brother had not yet married the sister. He married his wife, married a woman. She had a sister, but she was still single.
This
And
man was not, he wasn't his wife's sister.
he wasn't his wife's sister, right? Because he didn't get married yet. He didn't marry his sister yet. So we'll call it Reuven. Reuven married a woman. Her name is Rachel, let's say. Reuven married Rachel. He has a brother, Shimon. Fine, he's single. And his wife's sister is also single. They made a shidduch. My brother, marry your sister. But Reuven died before his brother married his sister. That the Gemara is going to say that there was, but the heter of the brother sister was activated. Reuven died already, and he has a wife and a single brother. This brother that's not married to the sister. So then, at that time, there was a heter of the brother's wife. He didn't marry her yet. He didn't do even, but it was activated. The Torah allows him to marry the brother's wife. Then he goes ahead and marries the sister. He shouldn't have. He shouldn't have married the sister because it's called the host. We'll get to that later. But he shouldn't have married. But he did. He married her. He married Leah. He married his brother's wife's sister. Now that woman becomes his wife's sister. Besides, the one who's the widow. The widow. Now we'll call that. But the widow now became, besides his brother's wife, also became his wife's sister. Since he married the sister of this widow, so she became the wife's sister. On that, you could say whole history. Since there's a heter, activated heter that's on deck, it's there. The heter is there. He's allowed to marry his brother's wife, even though she becomes now the wife's sister. Gonna disturb the same way the Mitzorah was ready to go on the morning of the 8th day, ready to bring the korban, going to the base of Mikdash, even though he's in Mitzorah, that the Torah says he's supposed to. Even though now the carry comes now, the heter is already activated. That the Torah would say all history, and that's a good havamina. That maybe he's allowed to marry her, even though she's also a wife's sister. But if the heter of the brother's wife is never activated, which the Gemara is going to say that maybe if the live brother Shimon he married. Rachel became his wife's sister before she became his brother's wife. So then the heter is never going to be activated. And even if she did get married first, the Gemara says in two steps. And even if she would have got married first, if the dead brother did marry his wife first, and she did become his brother's wife before he became his wife's sister. He didn't marry his wife yet. Shimon didn't marry Leah. But if Reuven didn't die at the time that Shimon married, so there was never a heter activated to marry his brother's wife. He wasn't allowed to marry his brother's wife when if Reuven was still alive without having died without children. So the only case where we're going to have that heter was activated was that Reuven married his wife first. Reuven, I mean to say, the one who died, the one who's going to be the dead man. He married his wife first, and then he died also. He also died without children. And now his widow is mutter to his brother, which is, so the Shimon is allowed to marry her because it's his brother's wife. That heter was activated. And then he marries the sister, and now this widow becomes also, besides bringing his brother's wife, also he's his wife's sister. Then you can have a room to say whole history, and then you need a pasuk to say that even that also, the Yibam doesn't override. That's going to be the next 15 lines or so. So the Gemara starts on the top line. The Gemara said and before, whole history. We're continuing with the point of history. And the Gemara says on the top line, that would make sense that it'd be as far to say whole history if the dead brother married first. The mace is the one who eventually died, and the chai is the one who's still alive. If we call him Reuven and Shimon, Reuven is the mace, Shimon is, so it doesn't mean he died, he married when he's dead. It doesn't mean he means the one who eventually died, he's called the mace. So we'll call him Reuven, the one who died eventually. If he married first his wife and then his brother married the sister, so then he was first. Then you could say that the Isser of the brother's wife was permitted because he was already, because that woman was the brother's wife. And then later on, the Isser of this wife's sister came to play. So that you could say that maybe it bulldozes that also.
It means before he died.
Right, it doesn't talk about that stage yet. Now the Gemara doesn't go into that yet, but you're right. The Gemara means to say just the order of who. This means who married first. But now the Gemara says even if he married first, it's not enough. Only if he also died. that brother had to have married and also died before his brother married the sister. But the Gemara says it in two stages. First, the Gemara says,
You did say that?
I'm not sure what you said.
I thought that Reuven got married and Shimon wasn't married yet. Oh, and then he had to have died before.
The Gemara is going to say in the second step, the Gemara is going to say he also had to have died.
He did Yibum before he got
He
married.
not even did Yibum. He didn't do Yibum. He didn't do Yibum. He just was ready to do Yibum. The Yibum was standing in front of him. He was supposed to
standing in front
marry
of
her.
him and he married his sister.
Right. He shouldn't have. He should have married his brother's wife. He married his wife, that woman's sister.
Okay.
So the Gemara says again that it's all good to say whole history if the one who died eventually first got married first, and then his brother married. Then the heter of the brother's wife was in play. It was available first before she became the sister's wife. But if the live brother, the one who survived, the surviving brother would have married first, and then the brother married that woman, so then she became the wife's sister before she became the brother's wife. And then you wouldn't say whole history. And then the Gemara continues, that also is not enough. We said at the second stage, and even if the dead brother that married first, also that's only if he also died first, died before the live brother married. That would be good if the dead brother married and also died. And then the brother married the sister. That in between, in the interim, from the time that the brother had died until he married the sister, so she was standing till Yibum. She was mutter to him. The heter of the brother's wife was activated. The heter of Yibum says, marry her. So he didn't marry her, but he could have married her. So then, since it was activated, so then it's going to bulldoze any other issue that comes up. And even if he marries the sister, and she now became also the wife's sister, that woman, the widow, becomes also the wife's sister. So it's mutter because it would be mutter, whole history, and that you need a pasuk to say, still don't marry her. Ella, yes, please.
I have a question. Why is it usher for him to marry the sister? Because a man can do Yibum even if he's married. So,
yes, we didn't go into that. I mentioned under my breath. I didn't mean to say that it happens to be that it's usher to marry the sister. It's called a host kukoso, but that's going to be later on.
okay.
You're right. You don't need it.
He could get married to anybody.
We'll leave it.
Once he has to do Yibum, he's supposed to do it first.
Put it in the freezer.
Okay.
Deep freeze. Ella, nasa mace, below mace. If the dead brother, I call him the dead brother the way the Gemara does, but it means not that he's dead at this point. It means the one who eventually died. The one who eventually died. If he had married first, but he didn't die, and the brother married the sister before his brother died. So that if the dead brother didn't die yet, and the live brother married the sister, she never became mutter to him. There never was a case that she became mutter. When did she become mutter? Only after the brother had married and died, and she was not, and the widow was not yet his wife's sister. That would be the one case. But if it wouldn't be that case, they wouldn't have been activated.
The Shimon married Leah before. No,
That's the worst case. If Shimon married Rachel,
Reuven married Rachel,
and he died.
Then, no, he didn't die yet. It says no makes.
That's what says is the problem. What says it wouldn't have happened.
Trying to say what the problem.
Oh, the problem, right? That case, you go ahead.
Reuven married
Rachel,
and then while he's alive, Shimon married Leah.
right. So Shimon to Rachel is both his brother's wife and also his wife's
So
sister.
then, if he dies, yeah, of course, then that's what they're saying. Then it's us.
And it wouldn't. There's not even Havamid. It's not called whole history because it never was history.
Yeah.
It never was a case of being mutter a brother's wife. The only case is going to be that Reuven married Rachel and he died, and at that point when he died, Shimon is supposed to marry Rachel. She's mutter at that time. The Isra, the brother's wife, went off, and then Shimon married the sister Leah. So now this Rachel became also his wife's sister. So then you could say that since the heter was already activated, the heter of marrying this woman is already activated, and it rolled over the Isra of brother's wife, so it also rolls over the Isra of his wife's sister. That you could say. Milo, and the word just points out that you have to have the heter activated in order to say whole history. The case of Metzora with the Valkyrie, Milo Modi Ula Shimra Keri Baleil Shmini Shein Machtis Yadel Avonos Lo Yasser B'Shashi Will Habi Korban. That Ula, he's the one who said that since he's a Masorah, and the Masorah is mutter to go into the base of Mikdash, so too he's allowed to go in even though he's a Balkari. That's only if he became a Balkari in the day of the 8th. That in the morning of the 8th, when the sun rose, he was mutter to go into the base of Mikdash because he's a Masorah, is allowed to go on the 8th day. And then even though now something came in the way, you knock it down. But if in the night, before he was able to go to the Korban, B'leil Shmini, then also Ula would agree that he's not allowed to go in because he never had a time that he was mutter to bring a Korban, which means only in the day allowed to bring a Korban. So then,
What happens Leil Shmini?
if he became Balkari at night, and then the morning the rises, he's also a Matzor and also a Balkari, then there's no heter because he never had a heter to go into the base of
Oh,
Mikdash.
he wasn't a Masorah alone.
He wasn't a Matzor alone, right? On the 8th day of the Matzorah, he was already a Balkari. So then there never was a heter activated. So you don't see whole history.
So
So
the
there-
person wouldn't agree to that.
We'll agree to that. We'll agree. So here also, there's no whole history only if the heter was activated. So the Gemara says, you're right. You're right. That's what I meant to say. That the reason why you need a pasuk that Yibam does not override the Isser Erva is only in this one case. That the Erva became an Erva after the heter was already activated. Agav, it wouldn't apply to all the cases. Like Bito, let's say the daughter wouldn't apply because over there it can't become daughter afterwards. But the case of the pasuk's talking about a wife's sister, that could happen afterwards, and that's the first teretz, and this teretz landed successfully, a safe landing. This teretz,
Really possible,
that what?
like this. They asked him every,
Everything's us. At the end of the day, everything's us. You can't do yibum to an erva. The only question is what do you need a pasuk? The whole 5 pages is only what it's pasuk. Of course you can. The whole question, what do you need a pasuk for? We found the case where you need a pasuk for. You need a pasuk for this case where there might have been a whole history, and Kamash Plan, even that case also you don't. So if the woman, the widow, who's supposed to have yibum, is also an erva, so you don't do it even in this case because of the pasuk. So that was the first teretz that worked. We had about many terutzim, and we went on and on, maybe eight, something like 7 terutzim or something like that. First, it took 2 pages to figure out a Seder Chalosa say. Then we tried 6 tries. A Seder Chalosa say Sheish B'Kares. None of them worked. That's not true. And then we tried that it's a Davashay B'Chlal V'Yasam Ra'Klal. We said no, it's a Davashay B'Chlal V'Yasam even. It's true. I say that right. It's true. I say Seder Chalosa say, but not a Losa say Sheish B'Kares.
Yeah.
Oh, Losa Sheish B'Kares. You have Pesach and Mila and those specific cases, but those are different. You're right. There are 3 cases we do say that as a Chalosa say Sheish B'Kares. Pesach, Mila, and Tamid, but the Gemara said all of those are different. You can't learn from them. In general, I say is not Dochalos, I say Sheish B'Kares. And the case of
but in a regular.
yes, again, I say Dochalos, I say yes, but I say it's not Dochalos, I say Sheish B'Kares. We only found 3 cases. It's not a cloud. The cloud is that it's not. I say it's not Dochalos, I say Sheish B'Kares. We did find a couple of exceptions. Mila, Pesach, Tamid, those are exceptions. Then we found about the Beis HaMikdash, Kibbut of Aim, those things are not. It came out that it's not Dochalos Sheish B'Kares. And also we had a 3rd case, what was that? About Mrs. Bezdin, also not Bezdin doesn't execute on Shabbos. We tried this, didn't work. It's we tried Mamatzina, also I think it didn't work. And then we came out to this one case. So that's coming 8. We had 8 tries. And then we finally we came out with history, and that works. And only works in a certain case, one case, which is whole history. Then we have another teretz. That was teretz number 1. It worked. Now we have another teretz, and there's going to be a 3rd teretz. So there are going to be 3 teretzim. Here the Gemara goes. If you want to have another teretz, why you need a pasuk to say that Yibum does not override Arayis. Asya Bakesha the Rabbi Yonah. There's a hekesh. Hekesh means a comparison. Rabbi Yonah is hekesh. He said it someplace else. Rabbi Yonah. We don't have them too often in the Gemara. Rabbi Yonah. Rabbi Yonah had a hekesh. Tam Rabbi Yonah, Bitem Rabbi Huna, great Rabbi Yeshua, Omar Kra, Kichol Asher Yasem, Mikola Toivos, Eila V'Nechrisu. There's a pasuk that generalizes V'Nechrisu. Is the last word. Kichol Asher Yasem, Mikola Toivos, Eila V'Nechrisu. Anybody that does any of these abominations should be cut off. So that pasuk includes in the word it talks about all the different arayos over there. Parashas Achrimos Kedoshim. It has a long list of all the arayos, and at the end of the pasuk it says anybody that does any of these abominations. So it says in this word it puts all the arayos together, and it puts them into one package, one unit. They're all the same, and that pasuk compares all of them. So as far the Gemara uses this for other places also, but as far as our purpose, we're going to say that since the Torah says that you're allowed to do yibum, that means and it's overriding the issue of marrying your brother's wife. So arayos are all the arayos are going to be included. All the other arayis are compared in this pasuk to a brother's wife. Ma eishes ach sharia. The Torah by saying Yibum is mutter is saying that it overrides the erva called a brother's wife. Of kol arayis nami sharia. You might have said that this hekesh would say that all the arayis are the same, and if the Torah permitted one erva, everything else is also mutter. It might be similar to what we said before about a mamatzina, before we said a mamatzina, but the mamatzina didn't work. But here this does work. There's a hekesh, and the hekesh says that all of them are the same. And ma'ishes achshaya of kol arayis nami sharia. You would have thought that just the way the Torah permits a brother's wife, also any of the other arayis also. That's why you have to have the Allah to say that it's asr. Allah was yavamo yavo Allah. That's a code word for the word yivam. And here it says that's only the code word. And now we say by the pasuk by the issue of marrying a wife's sister. It says the word Allah. And we say Allah means even Yibum. Once we have that code word that the word Allah means Yibum, so it says don't marry your sister's wife, even in the case of Yibum. Why do you need a pasuk? Because you would have thought that the pasuk compares all the arayis together. It says that all the tables are the same, all the abominations are all considered the same. So if it says that you're allowed to marry a brother's wife, you might also say that you're allowed to marry a wife's sister. So you have to say that you're not allowed to. Rashi has the kasha that says a terrorist, believe it. If anybody has a kasha, so hold on to the terrorist. Rashi has the kasha. We'll just try to say. That it says all the arayis. There's a pasuk that says kol ha'tevos. The pasuk says when it says arayis and Parashas Achimos Kedoshim, it says when it talks about it at the end of the whole subject, it says anybody that does any of these toevos.
But what's the genus of isn't that a simple way of knowing the pasuk?
But there's a hekesh. No, the pasuk says that. Yeah, but there's a hekesh over here that if whatever applies to one applies to the other ones also. And over there, the Gemara learns out different halachas. It says kol toevos.
So then, any time place that it says toeva.
No. Kol toevos. The pasuk has a list of all the arayis, and then it sums up and it says if anybody does any of these abominations, is going to be chayv kares. The fact that it unifies them in one word to say all of these abominations, that means that they're all on the same level. They're all compared to each other. They're all in the same bucket. They're all in the same boat. They're all the same. So if I find anything about one of them, it should apply to all the rest of them also. I don't need this halacha about Yibum, anything. Whenever it talks about other things, this is an application. The Rabbeinu didn't say it over here. The Rabbeinu said it on something else. And Rashi brings down what he's talking about. And we're going to say that this pasuk would compare all arayis, and the same way that that this is mutter, everything should be mutter. That's why you have to have the word of Yivama Yavo. That's why you have to have the word Allah, in order to say that it's Asr. If that's good, the Gemara continues. I put in parentheses just to, okay, if you like parentheses or not, the Marsakasha with a terrace over here. After you finish now, what do you say? That there's a pasuk that says that Yibum, that means you're allowed to marry a brother's wife. That Yibum permits a brother's wife. There's also a pasuk that says that he's not allowed to marry a wife's sister. That's Beferish. That's what the pasuk says. Allah, that you're not allowed to marry your wife's sister. How about all the other 14? There are other rights. Now what do you do? Means till now we only had that a wife's sister is usher. We looked at it. The wife's sister is usher. So we said a few pages ago. So all the rights are the same. Mamatzina, just like you find that a wife's sister is usher, so all the rights are usher. But now he's saying that there's also a pasuk that says that's mutter. The fact that the pasuk says that it's mutter to marry a brother's wife, that's regular yibum. So you have a pasuk that says it's mutter, and maybe you learn all the rights are from that. Maybe a chosisha is the exception. Only a sister's wife, only a wife's sister not. How do you know how to juggle the rest of their rights? We know that a brother's wife is mutter. You know that a wife's sister is usher. How about the other things? How about a daughter? How about a granddaughter? All the other, that mother-in-law. Let's analyze. All the other rights, we might compare it to a brother's wife, which is mutter. You might compare it to a wife's sister, which is usher. How do you know to compare them all the other 14? You're going to compare it to a wife's sister and say that it's usher. Maybe compare it to the brother's wife, which is mutter. Why is two to us into this kasha? There's a rule in Hilchas Hekesh. This is Hekesh over here. This pasuk is called Hekesh, that it compares all of them together. So there's a rule in Hilchas Hekesh that whenever you make a Hekesh, if you have a choice of going lenient or you're going stringent, you go to the stringent way. And this is called the stringent. Makshina is a Hekesh. Hekesh is a comparison.
I'll make the comparison. Makshina.
I think they call that in English a syllogism. Hekesh.
When you have a kula and a chumrah,
Oh, no,
make a syllogism with the.
with the chumrah, right. If you have two choices how to make the syllogism, you have a choice of making it in a lenient way.
I see.
or in a-
go.
Which way to go? So if you have a choice, you go l'chumrah. If you have a choice of making hekesh l'kula or l'chumrah, you go l'chumrah. That's a general rule in Hilchos Hekesh. In the drush of Hekesh, always go l'chumrah. So here, do yibum? Don't do yibum. So the l'chumrah is not to do yibum. So it's awesome. Iboy sema hacha trei yisui vacha trei yisui v'trei mitrei alpinan aval hacha chad yisui v'trei michad loy alpinan. That's a question of 2 against 1 because the brother's wife is always a brother's wife. When she's a wife's sister, she's also a brother's wife also. The Gemara had this far similar before yesterday, but not exactly right. The Gemara is saying it now. The Gemara is saying, look, which is more similar. You have a choice which to compare it to. To compare it to a brother's wife, or to compare. What are we talking about? All our rights: a daughter, a granddaughter, a daughter-in-law, the mother-in-law, all the other 14 rights we had. You want to know, is it comparable to the heter of a brother's wife, or is it similar to the isser of a wife's sister? That was the question. Which direction should you go? So we're going to say that it's more comparable to a wife's sister because the brother's wife is only a brother's wife. There's only one isser, brother's wife. But one we're talking about a wife's sister is also a brother's wife. That's the whole case. But my yibum over here. So all the cases are that it's a brother's wife. It's a brother's wife plus. It's a brother's wife plus also another kind of an erba. So all the other rights are going to be more similar to the wife's sister, which has 2 isurim involved. This erva, whatever it might be, plus the basic issue of a brother's wife. So it's more comparable to the 2 than to the 1.
That's why it'd be us who would have to.
Right. Right. That's why it's more comparable to the case of the isser than to the case of the heter.
And both of these are sphoras. These are logical reasons.
Logical reasons in how to darshan.
How to darshan.
Again, inside by saying this case over here by the wife's sister includes 2 isurim. That is also a wife's sister, also the brother's wife. And also the other case with learning out all these other rights also have 2 isurim, whatever it might be. The daughter plus the brother's wife. The daughter-in-law plus the brother's wife. They're all considered by the brother's wife. So and hacha, that's the case of the isser that you learn towards the isser. But over here, how does I read it? Hacha trei yisui vacha trei yisui. Trei mitrei alpina. That's a good drush. It's comparable to learn 2 from 2. Aval hacha chada yisua. But trei b'chada lo alpina. The case where it says that it's mutter is by the brother's wife. There's only 1 issue over there. So it's not comparable to learn 2 from 1. It means if you have a choice where to learn from, this case or that case, it's more comparable to the case that's us than to the case that's mutter. So
What
this
was the trey master?
trei mitrei. Trei mitrei. 2 from 2.
I thought it meant heter.
2 from 2.
Sure, the tray.
Again. Hacha trei yisuri, vacha trei yisuri. Here there's 2 prohibitions, and here there are 2 prohibitions.
Hachi tray is suri, the hachi tray is suri.
Yes, here there are 2 prohibitions. Here there are 2 prohibitions. And trei mitrei alfina, and you could learn 2 from 2. That's comparable to learn 2 from 2. Aval hacha, but over here to learn from a brother's wife, chada yisura. That the case of the brother's wife is only 1 isur over there. Trei michada lo alfina. It's not comparable to learn a heter of 2 isurim from a heter of 1 isur. So this was also a successful landing that we had the second teretz. Why do you need a pasuk? You need a pasuk because you might have a case of the Rav Yonah that says that all our rights are compared to each other, and therefore we're not doing the parentheses now. We're going back to what the ikar teretz was. This is only a kasha with a teretz. But the problem we had: why do you ever need a pasuk of aleha to tell you that the yibum does not override our rights? Of course it doesn't. It's a low association with chorus. The answer is you might think that the pasuk by the hekesh of Kolotei V'Sa'ela, maybe that compares all our rights, and whatever applies to one applies to all of them. So if you have an isser of a brother's wife, it becomes mutter. So you might say that all our rights become mutter because of this hekesh. So Kamash Malan, Allah, that it doesn't. Now goes the third teretz. A third answer to the big kasha we had 5-6 pages ago. The question is, why do you need a pasuk of Allah to tell you that you're not allowed to marry, do yibum to an Arab? Of course you're not allowed to. It's a serious avera. Of course it doesn't override it. This comes the third and final answer. You're right. That you don't need a pasuk for that. For that you don't need a pasuk. To say that yavam cannot marry an erva, he can't marry his wife's sister, he can't marry that. You don't need a pasuk for. You're right. It's not tochalosa say sheish b'kavos. We never thought of that. We never even dreamed that he'd be able to marry her.
It's very interesting until he cuts.
I don't get it, but tell me later. Then I say dochalosa sheish b'kavos because you're right. The kasha was a good kasha, and then I say dochalosa sheish b'kavos. So that does not need a pasuk. He is tzirkro l'meisat tzara. if you remember back 5 pages ago, the Gemara said the pasuk says lo tzikach isha lachosal lo tzikach l'sror l'galos ervasal leah b'chaya. Over there, the Gemara says Allah means even if it's Yibum, don't marry your wife's sister. Now, at this point, we're saying that that's not necessary. But the pasuk also said l'sror, and over there we learned out that not only her, also the co-wife. The co-wife is also Aser. So he was saying now that that's a Chiddush. The Chiddush is that the co-wife is Aser. The Issa that she's Aser, that's not a Chiddush. Of course she's Aser. She's an Erva. That a man cannot marry his wife's sister just because there's Yibum. Of course not. It's a Erva. It's a But there's also another wife. His dead brother had another wife, and she's not an Erva. So why not marry her? That's a Chiddush. That part is the Chiddush. And over there, Sarah saying because it continues, all those things. But the first thing that it says is not a Chiddush. That's not a Chiddush. That we would have known without a pasuk. The Gemara has problems with this. I also put into parentheses. It's going to take about 10 lines. That the Brisa does seem to say that there's a problem with there. But if you remember the Brisa, go back 5 pages. It says over there that the pasuk Allah means that you're not allowed to marry the erva. And then it says litzror, you're not allowed to marry the tzara. And then it could have said Latzur, and it says Latzur, so you're not allowed to marry the Tzara. So the Brisa seems to enumerate all the things. Everything needs a pasuk. You're not allowed to marry the Erva, you're not allowed to marry the Tzara, you're not allowed to marry the Tzara. So how could you say that the Erva doesn't need a pasuk? The Brisa seems to say that it does need a pasuk. The Erva Latzricha Kra, the pasuk does not need the Erva itself does not need a pasuk. Vatanya, Ainli Elohi. The Brisa did say these words. The Brisa says, even after it says Allah, I only would know that she's also to marry. How do you know the Tzara? But it says that you need a pasuk for he, you need a pasuk for the Arab itself. The Gemara says doesn't mean that. It's only a lead up to the next thing. It says it has to say Allah in order to say that that's Litzror. It has to say we're talking about Yibum and don't marry the Tzara. But you don't need it for he. The Brisa doesn't mean that. It's only a lead up. The Gemara's kasha is go further in the Brisa over there. It says again, Ein li Elohein. But Katani, I can't get. I want to just do the Ein li Elohein. That's the quotation. I got the Katani. I can't control it. But Ein li Elohein, the Brisa over there says, further down the Brisa, after it says that other arise, you learn that other arise from Eshesach, it says also, only them I know. How do you know that the Tzaras? So it's mashman that the Hain also was a step in the drasha that you had to learn out that you're not allowed to marry the Erva, and you're saying you don't need a pasuk for that. Again, we shouldn't say we're saying it's only a lead up because once you really got to the next point that the Tzaras are rasa, that the co-wives are rasa, but that she's rasa, that the Erva rasa doesn't need a pasuk, not the wife's sister, not the daughter, not the mother-in-law. That's pasuk. You're not allowed to marry them because it's the losa sheish b'karas. The only chiddush of the pasuk is that you're not allowed to marry the tzara either.
So we're knocking off that question.
We knocked off the kasha, so the terrace is good. We hold the terrace was a good terrace. We had a kasha, we had a terrace. Then even though the Brisa seems to say that you need a pasuk for the Erva, it doesn't mean that. And Rava's terrace is good. The Gemara has a kasha from another Brisa, which we didn't have yet. We had 5 pages ago. We only had the pasuk about Aleha. And over there we learned out Aleha means even Yibum, like we had the code word from Yavamo Yavo Aleha, and we learned out that you're not allowed to marry her and the Tzara. It happens to be another brisa that says the same halacha with a different drasha. That the Gemara didn't tell us till now. It's going to bring it in over here. Another drasha for the same point that you're not allowed to marry an erva even b'makom yibum. Tashma Rebbe Yomer b'lakach ulakacha v'yabem v'yidma. The pasuk really says ulakacha. Let's try to highlight that. The pasuk says ulakacha, and also says v'yidma. The pasuk says. Yavamo yavo aleha ulakacha lo lisha v'yibma. That if as man two brothers were there and one of them died without children, so the live brother should take her ulakacha v'yibma. He should take her and he should be miyabem her. The hey at the end of the pasuk means her. He should take her ulakacha with a mapike and he should be miyabem her. And Rabbi says from this pasuk, the fact that it could have said ulakacha, could have said miyabem, it could have said. He takes, he's miyabim. Why does it say he takes her? He's miyabim her. Lesser tzaras v'arayis. The pasuk is coming to teach you that you're not allowed to marry the tzara and the erva. That's the words of Rebbe. Rebbe said to tell you that you're not allowed to marry the tzara and the erva, which really should have said the other way. He should have said the erva and the tzara. He should have said both. But the Gemara thinks that the Brisa says that you need a pasuk to say that you're not allowed to marry the erva also. According to what we're saying now, Rava says you don't need a pasuk for the erva. You just need a pasuk for the tzara. He should have said less of tzaros, but he says less of tzaros v'arayis. That means that the erva itself also needs a pasuk to say that you're not allowed to marry her. So it's against Rava's teretz. Rava says you don't need a pasuk for that, and he says you do need a pasuk for that. So the Gemara is not impressed. Less of a shell rice. The Brisa that says here less of tzaros v'arayis. put in the word Soros shall arise. Take out the vav and put in a shell. So Soros shall arise. It also makes better sense why it says Soros first. If it would be two, it should have said arise then Soros. Okay, but it says it doesn't mean that. It means only Soros. It doesn't mean arise. Arise. You don't need a pasuk. You just need a pasuk for Soros. But the Marz Akasha, forget about what he said. There are two psukim, Ulakacha and Yibma. So you don't need two psukim. If he's saying that the whole drasha necessary is only to say that Soros are also, but ever shows us without a pasuk. How come there are two psukim over here? But Trey Kroy can also there are two psukim. My love, don't you need two psukim to say that one is for the Erev Zasa, one is the Tzara, and you're saying that Erev doesn't need a pasuk at all. That's what you're saying, Rabbi. But the pasuk has two psukim. The Gemara says no, it doesn't mean that you don't need two psukim for Erev. No, either Vidi and the Tzara. Both are coming to tell you the dinner the Tzara, the Erev is pashat, they did not allow to marry her. But one is Chad Lameisat Tzara b'Makam Mitzvah, the Chad Lameshvit Tzara Shalom b'Makam Mitzvah. This we had a couple of pages ago when we first started the sugya. Dr. Fine helped us out at the time that. The Issa to marry a wife's sister is only if she happened, the co-wife of a wife's sister is only if it happens to be also the brother's wife. Because there's no mitzvah of Yibum. So she becomes the regular Issa of a brother's wife. Why is it Issa to marry a co-wife? The co-wife is not a nerva. But there's no mitzvah of Yibum. The Torah took off the mitzvah of Yibum in the case where one of the wives is related. So the co-wife doesn't have a mitzvah of Yibum. Since there's no mitzvah of Yibum, so she's a brother's wife. But there's no Issa stam to marry Erva's co-wife. Dr. Fine gave us a simple example that we're going to use the whole time now. If somebody's there's no mitzvah of Yibum, so then there's Issa of a brother's wife.
No mitzvah to marry a co-wife.
In the case of Yibum. So if there's
no mitzvah to marry a co-wife.
So if there's no mitzvah, so it remains that she's a brother's wife. She's a brother's wife. But if there'd be a co-wife, that it's somebody's a wife's sister is married to somebody, and there's also a co-wife. A wife's sister is married to a man who has another wife. Is this person allowed to marry his wife's sister's co-wife? Yes. I mean, of course, the husband died, divorced or whatever. He's allowed to marry his wife's sister's co-wife. There's no issue to marry a Tzara Serva. What we call a Tzara Serva is no such issue. The issue is only that if she also happens to be the brother's wife, so there's no mitzvah of Yibum. There's no mitzvah of Yibum, so it's a brother's wife. You're not allowed to marry a brother's wife if there's no mitzvah of Yibum. But it wouldn't be so simple. Today's Gemara is going to be that's not so simple. That's halacha. The halacha is that there's no such issue to marry the co-wife of an erva, only if it's a case of Yibum. But it wasn't so simple, and that's going to be today's drushes. But that's what the Gemara says now, that you need two psukim, both of them only about the tzorah. The erva alone, surely you're not allowed to marry an erva, even if it's mitzvah, even if it's Yibum, it's pashit, because it's lo sheish b'koros. But you need two psukim. Chad l'meis tzorah b'mokam mitzvah. When it says mokam mitzvah, it's another way of saying that it's a brother's wife. It isn't the mitzvah. What does it mean mitzvah? That is a havamid of Yibum because it's your brother's wife. So one is to tell you that you're not allowed to marry the co-wife if it's a case of being the brother's wife. The brother's wife's co-wife.
The mitzvah is Yibum, right?
Right.
Yeah. So she's
she's also because no mitzvah of Yibum and she's a brother's wife without a mitzvah. But the Chadam Mishri Sarah shall have a mitzvah. But to say that there's no issue to marry the co-wife of an erva if it's not a question of a brother's wife. The word b'mokam mitzvah is another way of saying a shorthand of saying a brother's wife. It doesn't mean mitzvah. It gets a little confusing because mitzvah sounds like it's a mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah because there's no mitzvah to marry Yibum in such a case. But it means that the scenario is that it's a brother's wife, where you might think that Yibum would happen. So one pasuk is coming to tell you that there's an isser to do Yibum to the co-wife of an erva, of a wife's sister. But now it's telling you another pasuk that if it wouldn't, it's only when is it usher? Only if it also is a brother's wife, as we said, that's a case of Yibum. But if it wouldn't be a case of Yibum, stam to marry the co-wife of an erva, there's no such issue. My time, how do you see the pasuk? How are we going to dash in it now? It says ulukacha, it says v'yibma, v'yabim v'yibma. This drasha to say that it's Yibum only by Yibum. Yemakom Yibum huda sivat tzara. The Issa was saying that you're not allowed to marry a co-wife is only because it's a case of a brother's wife. But if it wouldn't be a case of a brother's wife, there's no Issa to marry the co-wife of an erva. So that was the third terrorist and also a successful landing. We had three terutzim of why you need a pasuk. Rav Ashi goes back to this last terrorist. That's put in parentheses to clear away that Rav Ashi is going back, not to what we just said now. Rav Ashi is going back to Rava's main terrorist, back to the beginning of all this parentheses, back to Rava. Rava said that the case that a pasuk is to tell you not that the Erev is us. Surely the Erev is us. You don't need a pasuk for that. It's coming to tell you that the Tzara is us. And now Rashi backs that up. Amar Ravashi, Masis Nami Deka. This is also Muduik in the Mishnah itself. Tiktani Chameshes Rinoshim Potu so saying. That's the Mishnah beginning of the Masechta that base the first words. 15 women they pater their co-wife. It doesn't even talk about them. It doesn't even mention the fact. It's not even worth the Mishnah's breath to say that they're not allowed to marry. It just talks about that they pater the co-wife. It doesn't say that they're not allowed to do yibum, and also they pater the co-wife. It just talks about the co-wives as if there's no chiddush. The Shema Mina, very nice, sounds very good. That the Mishnah did not consider it a chiddush that the Erev alone is not allowed to do yibum. The only chiddush is that the co-wife doesn't do yibum. Easy yofi. The Gemara, now or less, more or less, the Gemara now doesn't have to do with the whole sugya about say the whole question and the answer. It's going on the drasha that we said before, that there's a pasuk that says that you're not allowed to marry an Erev. We said maybe that pasuk you don't need. That pasuk's not to tell you. That's wants to tell you you're not allowed to marry your co-wife. The next Gemara, just to make it readable, I think that the Gemara now, I think that's the question on the Gemara. The Gemara is forgetting for the time being that you're allowed to marry a Tzoras Erev if it's not a brother's wife. What we call Shalom B'Makom Mitzvah. The Gemara thinks that it says don't marry a wife's sister, litzror. Don't take a wife's sister, and it says litzror, which Vidashni means even the co-wife. And the Gemara thinks at this point, for argument's sake, the Gemara thinks that you're not allowed to marry a wife's sister's co-wife, even if it wouldn't be a brother's wife. We're addressing Rava, but Kasha might apply to everybody, that how come you don't need a pasuk, he said, because you know that I say it's not dochalosa say sheish b'kara, so surely you can't marry the erva. That you don't need a pasuk for the co-wife also not to do yibum, because the Gemara at this point holds that you're not allowed to marry a erva's co-wife, even if it would not be yibum. But we were talking for the last 10 minutes that there's no such issa, and the truth is, we're right, there is no such issa. But the Gemara at this point thinks that there is. The Gemara thinks that there's an issa to marry the co-wife of an erva. If so, for sure you're not allowed to do yibum. The same way that the yibum doesn't override any kind of erva, this also is an erva. You're not allowed to marry a erva's co-wife, and the pasuk on that says it's a chiv courage, and the Gemara thinks that you're not going to do with yibum, so of course yibum is not going to override it. The following answer, you're right. It doesn't need a pasuk for that either. You don't need a pasuk. This if tzara would be usher, if the tzaras ever would be usher, then you would not need a pasuk to say that it's usher even for yibum. Of course, if it's usher, it's usher even if it's yibum. The mishri tzara shalom mitzvah. The pasuk is telling you this halacha gufa that there is no such isser to marry the co-wife of an erva. My timer. How do you see that on the pasuk? Amar kra aleha. The pasuk says. Allah, which is the key code, that's the pasuk Allah, that's the code word for yibum. That it's only us to marry a co-wife of an erva only if it's because it also happens to be the yibum case. That is the case of the brother's wife. Since it's a brother's wife and there's no mitzvah to do yibum, so she remains a brother's wife, which is asa. But if it wouldn't be a brother's wife, there is no issa to marry the tzara of an erva. The rest of the Gemara now that we're going to do today, we're not going to finish the whole daf today, but the Gemara is going to juggle with this point. Is it asa to marry a tzara, the co-wife of an erva? And the Gemara goes and juggles very extreme. The pasuk we're learning about this issue about the permission to marry the co-wife of an erva, and it is asa only when there's yibum involved because she's the brother's wife without any mitzvah of yibum. That's the same pasuk where it talks about you're not allowed to marry a wife's sister. And the Gemara said a second ago that it says in the pasuk you're not allowed to marry the co-wife only because there's yibum. That was the pasuk Allah that we said Allah that the issa to marry the co-wife of the wife's sister is only because it's a yibum case. So the Gemara is going to be very very daring and say. So the issa to marry a wife's sister also says in the same pasuk. Maybe the whole issa to marry a wife's sister is only if it's a case of yibum. Only the whole issa of marrying a wife's sister is only going to be when it's the brother's wife. In a case where the brother's wife also happens to be the wife's sister, so there's no mitzvah of yibum, so then you can't marry her. But there's no issa to maybe there is no such issa to marry a wife's sister. This Gemara is being very daring. The Gemara is trying to take down the whole issa, marrying a wife's sister. You're allowed to marry a wife's sister. You can take two sisters. It's only us if there's a case of Yibum, that and it also happens to be your brother's wife, then don't marry her. That's the most kasha. Maybe I suggest, maybe say, I'm going to say, that there is no such erva of marrying a wife's sister. It's only if it's a case of Yibum that happens to be a brother's wife also. But if it would be not a case, it wouldn't be a scenario of Yibum, it wouldn't be a brother's wife, then there's no issue to marry a wife's sister. The Gemara is surprised. It sounds the words are very strange. You talk that it's mutter when it's not a mitzvah, and it's also when it is a mitzvah. Those words are very strange. The mitzvah makes things more mutter, it doesn't make things more asr. Isn't it a kal v'chomer? If it says that it's a mitzvah, it's asr, even by a mitzvah, it's asr, now you're going to say that when it's not a mitzvah, it's mutter. Now, that's not so difficult because we said Makkah mitzvah doesn't mean mitzvah. It means that there's a case of Yibum, it's a brother's wife. That's what the Gemara answers. The co-wife, that's what comes out. After everything's over, after all the dust settles, that's what comes out, that you're only not allowed to marry the co-wife of the wife's sister, only if it happens to be a case of being also the brother's wife. It happens to be a Yibum, and the Yibum scenario, and the Issa that's going to be remain at the end is going to be because it's going to be a brother's wife. So maybe the whole Issa of marrying the wife's sister is also only because there's no mitzvah of Yibum in such a case, and it remains a brother's wife. But if it wouldn't be that case, maybe there's no such Issa as marrying. Amalei, tomorrow is the answer for this terrace, but this terrace is not going to hold. I put in parentheses because it's not going to work. The Gemara is going to slug it, we're going to knock it down. So I just went on to the next terrace. But to see the terrace and to see why it's no good, Amalei, so Rabbi responded, Allah Amar Kra B'chayeha. The pasuk says, Isha Allah Chosel Lo Sikach Litzro L'Galo Ser Vosel Leha B'chayeha. The word B'chayeha is part of the pasuk. That's the word B'chayeha. So there's a drash, you're right. In logic, the way we said the drasha so far, you could have said that there's no issue to marry a wife's sister, only if there's a case of also being a brother's wife. But there's a pasuk that says B'chayeha, culture B'chayeha, the fact that it says an extra word in her lifetime. So it's coming to say, anytime she's alive, which means that not only because she's a brother's wife, even without that, you can't marry a wife's sister in any case. But the Gemara says that's not true. You need the pasuk to say B'chayeha. This is a very important pasuk to say that the issa to marry a wife's sister is only as long as the wife is alive. This is an exception to all the other arayas. All the other arayas, there's no difference if the connecting factor is alive or not. Let's say mother-in-law. Once a mother-in-law, always a mother-in-law. Once a daughter-in-law, always a daughter-in-law. It doesn't make a difference if the connecting factor, the wife, who's a mother-in-law, the wife's mother. Even if the wife died, he still can't marry the mother-in-law. Or if the son died, he still can't marry the son's wife, daughter-in-law. Any kind of a granddaughter, even if the daughter that does make a difference. All these things don't make a difference, even if this marriage was broken afterwards. But one erva is an exception. The issa to marry your wife's sister is only as long as the wife is alive. Once the wife dies, it's mutter to marry the wife's sister. So you need a pasuk. Of course, you need the pasuk. You can't say the word b'chaya is extra. It's necessary to say that it's mutter after death. But the Gemara says no, we don't need the pasuk for that. There's another pasuk. The pasuk says the isha alachosa. The beginning of the pasuk. That pasuk alone is mashma only while both of them are alive. Other rights doesn't say such a kind of a term, but here it says a woman to her sister don't marry. That means only as long as the sister is alive. The wife is alive. So you don't need the pasuk b'chaya to tell you that. But the Gemara says no. That would have not been enough. That would have been mashma that it's only usher as long as they're still married. That pasuk, you're right, that it would have been mashma that it's mutter after death, but it would have been mashma also that it's mutter after divorce. Havamen and his gashashai would have thought that he can't have both sisters together. He can't be married to both sisters. But if he married one woman and then he divorced her, he could marry the sister, and that's not true. He can't marry her as long as she's alive. That the pasuk had to tell you with the word b'chaya to say that it's not dependent if she's with her together. Even if she's not, even if he divorced the first one, he cannot marry a sister as long as she's alive. So you do need the word b'chaya, so this terrace falls off. So again, back to the kasha again. How do you know that is usher to marry your wife's sister? Maybe it's only usher if she's also the brother's wife at the same time, and there's no yibum, so it remains a brother's wife. Maybe there is no usher to marry a wife's sister. So the Gemara answers, They're going to answer this kasha because there are two psukim that seem to contradict each other. In the drash world, of course, in the pshat everything's good, but in the drash world they seem to contradict each other. In order to reconcile the contradiction, we're going to have to say the way the halacha is. One pasuk says, "Ishalach osalo sikach litzvor." The pasuk continues, "Like Allah said, that's the pasuk. So the Gemara is mentioning that Ishalach osalo sikach litzvor, don't take a woman to the sister. Means if he's married to a woman, don't take her sister together with her, litzvor. And that pasuk is mashma that there are two isurim. That is the word litzvor means litzvor, the co-wife. We said don't take the sister, don't take the wife's sister and the co-wife. That's mashma that there are two isurim. But the pasuk at the end says the galos erbasa to uncover her nakedness, which would mean to her shame, to uncover her shame. But the point is to say that this is lashon yachid. This pasuk l'kala erbasa, it doesn't say erbasan. It doesn't say plural, which is mashma. There's only one isser. A second ago we said that there's isser on the wife's sister and her co-wife. This pasuk on the drash level is mashma. There's only one isser. That there's no isser on somebody. The chada mashma. That's mashma. That is only one. Does contradict each other. The pasuk first says there's two isurim on the sister, on the wife's sister, and also on the co-wife. And then the other pasuk is mashma. There's only one isser, not on the co-wife. Okay, it's not how you're going to reconcile the answer. The mokum mitzvah shtein asuvas. Shalom make a mitzvah. He asuvah v'tzarasa muteres. That if there's a case of being a brother-in-law, being the brother's wife also, the case of Makkah Mitzvah, the scenario of Yibam, where it's the brother's wife. So then there's Isser on the marrying the wife's sister and also the co-wife. And if there's no mitzvah, it's not a scenario of Yibum, then one of them is still Asa. He Asura, it's a Rasa Muteris. The Gemara's kasha was, just to recall, the Gemara's kasha was that maybe there is no such Isser of marrying a wife's sister, only when there's Yibum, only in the case of being a brother-in-law, in the scenario of Yibum. But the Gemara says no, because the Pasuk's mashma that sometimes she's Asa and the one co-wife is not. If there'd be a case of Yibum, the scenario of being a brother's wife, then the co-wife is also Asa. The pasuk is mashma that there's a case that there is an issur on one of them on the wife's sister, even if their co-wife is going to be mutter. That case is going to be when there's no scenario of yibum, that it's not a brother's wife. So we thought to try to be matir a wife's sister, that it's mutter to marry a wife's sister, if there's no issue of yibum, but we found out that it's not true. That is one case that the tzara is also usher. That means when it is the brother's wife, but if it's not the brother's wife, then she's mutter, but it's still also to marry the wife's sister.
She's mutter.
It's mutter. It's always also to marry your wife's sister as long as she's alive, as long as the wife's alive. And there's no difference if it's yibum or not. The Gemara was trying to make a daring move to say there's no issue of marrying a wife's sister only if it also happens to be the brother's wife. It's a case of yibum, the yibum scenario. Then don't marry the wife's sister.
And that's what it said.
Right.
We thought it was only for that case.
We would have thought that it only applies to that case. Now we're saying that even in a case where there's no yibum, still one of them is usher, not the co-wife, but the wife's sister is still usher. Even if there's no yibum scenario, it's not a wife's sister, nothing to do with yibum.
Will still be usher.
Still be usher. The Gemara now makes even more of a daring move. Say mamish the opposite. The Makkah Mitzvah he asura v'tzarasa muteres. Shalom Makkah Mitzvah shtein asuras. Say that if it's a yibum scenario that it's a brother's wife, so then that's the case where she's asa and the Sarah is mutter. In the case where there's
She'd
not
be mutter because
this Safar is going to say that when there's a mitzvah, we're matter more. The tzara will be mutter. She's always going to be asa. We're going to say one pasuk she's always asa. But when is the tzara mutter? We said that the real halacha is that the tzara that you're not to marry a co-wife of a sister. It's of an erva. It's a co-wife of an erva. It's only asa when it's a yibum case. That's the truth. That you're allowed to marry the co-wife of a erva. No such issa. But if it's a yibum case, then you're not allowed to. But the Gemara is throwing out mamish the opposite. Say the opposite. Say that the mitzvah is a reason to be matir more. The fact that there's a yibum case, we're saying the whole time that yibum was just a way of saying a brother's wife. That's a problem. But and we can't forget it's also a mitzvah of yibum. So maybe it's opposite. That when is it also to marry the co-wife? When there's no mitzvah of yibum. But if there's a mitzvah of yibum, then it's mutter. The Gemara is throwing that possibility out. Right. The Makkah Mitzvah he also with Tzara Muteres. And Shalom Makkah Mitzvah everyone's also. Maybe there's issa to marry your wife's sister's co-wife. But when there's yibum, the Torah permitted it. Im kain lo yomar aleha. The Gemara answers that you're right. That would be the svara. The svara pshuta would be that for a mitzvah will matter more. But the pasuk Allah is coming to tell you do the opposite of what you thought. But that's why the pasuk throws in something. There's something. If it would have been quiet, you would have said that on default. You would have said that on your own. In fact, the pasuk says Allah. It's coming to say do the opposite of what you would have thought, and therefore by b'makom mitzvah it becomes more usher. The b'makom mitzvah, that's when the co-wife of the erva is usher. If it wouldn't be for the scenario of Yibum, it would have been with her. One more kasha and teretz. Amalei Rav Ashi Rav Kana. Mimai d'hayaleh ali surah doma lateru. The Gemara is mamish making a big mapechana. The Gemara is going to say that maybe you learned the whole time from the beginning, 5 pages ago. But the Brisa said that Allah tells you that this is to marry a wife's sister, and the tzara, everybody is coming to say even the makom yibum. The fact that it says Allah tells you even if it's a yibum scenario, still you're not allowed to. Who says? Maybe read the pasuk differently. Maybe the pasuk is coming to tell you heter. Don't marry your wife's sister, not her, and not her co-wife. And that's when it's talking about when there's no yibum. When it's not in the case of a brother's wife. Shalom b'makom Allah. But b'makom Allah, shtein b'toros. Maybe read the pasuk like this. Isha Allah chosalo sikach l'tzroa legalos ervasa. Kama. Allah v'chayeha. If it's a case of yibum, then yes, do it. That's a fancy drasha we didn't talk about, but the more is entertaining the possibility that maybe his pasuk is coming to say that it's also to marry wife's sister and also her co-wife when there's no yibum involved, which is not true halachically. And then when it comes to yibum, then everything is mutter. It's even mutter to marry the wife's sister also, which is mamish. How do you say 180-degree turnover?
Yeah.
And the Gemara says no. In Cain the Galo said, but the so we said the drush a couple of lines ago that there's a pasuk that's mashma that sometimes one of them is mutter, one of them is asa. It says the Galo. It says
Is the pasuk?
What?
The Galo Serva, is that part of the pasuk?
The Galo Serva is the pasuk, right?
Yeah.
The Galo Serva sa. Really, you should have said erva sa. It's maybe a printing mistake. It should have said, let's say the pasuk over here. I'm pointing it on the screen. The Galo Serva sa. Ishallah chosalo sikach l'tzroa the Galo Serva sa. That's mashma only one. And that's what the Gemara said. The Chadamash, but that's what the Gemara said. That those words, the Galo Serva sa, means only one. One of them is mutter, one of them is asa. Which one? The erva is asa and the tzara is mutter. But if you're going to say that Allah b'chaya, everything's mutter, so it comes out that never a case where one is also one is mutter, because even makom mitzvah shtein mutaros. If it's the case of even me saying well, Allah b'chaya, everything's mutter, even mutter to marry the erva, and inshallah makom mitzvah you come to say shtein asurus even the tzara, so it doesn't fit. You have to have a case. One is mutter, one is us. That's the end of the Gemara. That's the end of the day. Just to get to the halacha.
This last thing was to knock it off.
Right. We're not with the possibility. It doesn't work. So what comes out is what we thought the whole time. That it's also to marry your wife's sister as long as she's alive. No difference if she's divorced or not. As long as she's alive, it's also to marry the wife's sister. After the wife dies, it's mutter to marry the sister. That's all when that doesn't have to do with yibum. If it has to do with yibum, I'm sorry, one more step before we go further, is that the co-wife is mutter, that the wife's sister's co-wife is mutter, no such issa. But if it has to do with yibum, a case where there also happens to be the brother's wife, so then there's no mitzvah of yibum, and since there's no mitzvah of yibum, then even the co-wife is also asa because she's a brother's wife without the mitzvah of yibum. That seems to be the end of the sugya. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but this was the sugya that started on Daf Gimel Amud Beis, and we're holding over here Daf Ches Amud Beis already, and that was one big sugya that the pasuk says that you're not allowed to do yibum even if there's an erva, you're not allowed to do yibum. And the more I had a question, what do you need the pasuk for? And we found 3 to what's in. Adkan. Yes, you had a question before? If you okay. Yes, thank you. We'll be back in a few minutes with Hilchos Purim.
Fast and Furious.
What is that?